What's up, infinite beings? Welcome along to the Infinite Me. It's great to have you here again today. Every day we're having conversations about how to incorporate more infiniteness into your life, how to live and breathe it every single day. I know we all feel like we're infinite, particularly those on the consciousness journey. No doubt you've tapped into that feeling of being infinite. But the question is, why don't we live it every day? So that's really what we're exploring here actually today, that particular question. So yesterday we started a mini-series. We're calling it a mini-series because it'll probably go over 3 or 4 days. Our own mini-series about exactly that topic. Why are we not stepping into our infinite zone? Why wouldn't you do that every single day? What stops us from doing that? And yesterday we started exploring that broader concept, I guess, and we sort of looked at things like you might be embarrassed to sort of admit that. You might feel that it's not really what the human game is here, that we're not meant to be infinite. We're actually meant to be in the human game.
Yes.
And lots of just different reasons. And I guess everybody has a different reason for not actually stepping into the infinite space, but maybe there's some commonalities there. So if that... if you haven't watched that first one, it actually is really worthy of watching because I think we covered some really important topics yesterday.
Yep.
Today we're going to drop in a little bit more into asking the question, why do you, why do we, why do some people not step into the space of actually, not that you have to go and declare and announce, make a big announcement to the world that you're actually really into consciousness and into spirituality and you love talking about this topic.
Yeah.
But we have heard just recently, particularly, but we've certainly right throughout our entire journey, and we've gone through it as well, about not, it's almost like shying away from the fact that you're into that stuff. It's you hide it away.
Yes.
So there might be your friends and family that don't even know that you're into that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And it sort of begs the question, why? And can you really be your true authentic self if there's parts of you that are hidden to the world, particularly to those people that are important to you?
Yes.
So, yeah. What's your?
It's an like question to ask is like, can you be your true authentic self if you are hiding that? Because we go on the consciousness journey to embody our true self and wake up to that. Wake up more and more to who we truly are, or remember who we truly are, whichever phrase you want to kind of use, and so it does kind of almost answer that question. It's just like, well, you can't actually be your true self if you are hiding part of yourself. Like you can't.
Yeah.
How could you actually fully know yourself as an infinite being if you're afraid of part of that or part of your identity, or maybe not afraid of your own identity, but of the reaction that you think you might get, judgment perhaps from friends and family, or for some people, they might feel like they're actually going to be excluded from I'm just thinking like when people leave like a religious community, they get, what's that word where they get kind of, there's like a word for it, where they get
cast out.
That sort of like for some people, they might feel like they're going to be really excluded from their community or cast out of maybe a close family or something like that. So maybe, or you've heard people that's happened to, and so it may not even be, a reality for you perhaps, but you fear that it could be. And so maybe this is all the things that sort of stop people from maybe, like stepping out and telling people what they're up to, or they're hiding, like that they're doing a particular course, or that they're reading certain books. And I guess particularly I would say too that if you've come from a quite a strict religious upbringing, it does seem to be I have found on my journey that there does seem to be more people that find that harder to sort of admit to the world, if you like, that they're thinking differently, because it is quite a different way of looking at spirit and God or source, whatever you want to kind of call it. And it does challenge, some people, especially if you have been brought up in a whole family that's very religious and, really, sticks to their beliefs on things. And so that can be quite challenging, or you might fear that what's going to happen if they find out. They may not even know that you're on this path at all, sort of thing. So, so you're afraid that what's going to happen if you actually challenge them or have a conversation around that you're thinking differently. So there's lots of different ways that it can how it might show up.
Yeah, I guess it begs the question, what's the consequences of not showing up authentically? And again, not that you have to declare it to the world,
No.
but if there's a part of you that is not having those conversations that feel true for you, with a family member or with a friend, or just being upfront about what you're into type thing. And I guess that's why we do seek community, and we seek a safe zone. Like, oftentimes I hear that term sort of thing, that safe zone. But to me, that sort of begs the question, why do you need a safe zone? Shouldn't everything be safe? Like,
yes.
Why are you feeling unsafe in what seems to be the outside world sort of thing? Like, you've got your internal world with your own, with yourself, and maybe with your partner who's into this stuff, or a core group of friends. And then we have a wider community of people that are into this stuff, and we feel okay with that. You know, we go to courses, or we connect in some way with parts of our community. Yeah. And then there seems to be this outside world that are not into this stuff. And somehow we're being judged, or maybe we haven't been judged. Maybe we're just deeming that we might be judged.
That we might be,
because there is this separation. It feels like there's separation going on, that we're on the inside of the consciousness space, and there's a whole bunch of other people that are not. The majority of people are not on this journey. So it is that feeling of being misunderstood, that misinterpreted perhaps, that people will misinterpret. And I think that's been one of the things for me as well, is like, okay, we've sort of had a few conversations with mum and dad, who are still strict Catholic, still go to church every week, raised us in Catholic schools. So we've definitely had head-to-heads about, you were raised better than this. That seems to be the common one. So I feel like if I was to face mum and dad with some of this stuff, that there would be a very much shutting down, a lack of openness to even discuss this sort of thing. They have their indoctrinated beliefs, and they're not willing to change it. And mum will say that outright, you don't change your beliefs. And so there's no room for discussion. I don't even relate to all of this. There's literally no room for discussion, and should there be any room for discussion? I guess that's where I sort of go, what's the point? Like, I'm not trying to convince her of what I'm into, or what you're into, and do they really even need to know? Like, they sort of know enough. It's sort of interesting, this project right now, they seem to think that we're talking about lifestyle, which is quite funny. Their interpretation of that. So I don't know what their interpretation of lifestyle is. Like, we've had products put out for house sitting and traveling the world and earning an online roaming income, Jodie and I, for many years now. So I don't know whether she thinks I've brought you into the fold of that, and now we're talking to other people about having a travel lifestyle. But that's their definition of what we're doing right now. So it's sort of quite funny. And it's like, I don't feel to change that. Like, it just doesn't really worry me whether they know or not, type thing. So sometimes I do get, like, there's a sense of, it's just easier if you don't have to go down that line, particularly maybe with parents.
I think there probably might have been a stage where probably tried to convince them a little bit about what we were into and things like that. But then I think definitely got to a point now, it's just like, I don't really care now. Like, it's not about, like you said, it's not about convincing the other person. Let's just let them be them and you be you, and go about doing what you're doing in the world. But I definitely don't feel that sense of having to hide what I do or anything like that. Like, and I think the more that you, this everything we talk about, the infinite me, hear about that infinite expression that we all are, and consciousness, like the more we remember that, then why do we need to feel safe in the world? Because that's just, to me, is kind of reinforcing that illusion of separation. The more that we feel like we've got to have really safe communities, and we can't speak outside of those. And okay, I definitely understand that support groups are sometimes necessary when you're on the journey, just that you've got people that can talk the same language as you. That's really helpful. And you can ask for some guidance sometimes if you're a little bit stuck. So that's definitely, worthy of having those sort of communities that you can tap into. But I think there's that difference between then feeling like you have to hide in those communities and stay hidden and not share outside of that group with anybody what you're doing, or very select people. You have to be very careful with your wording because you don't want to trigger somebody, or you don't want to get a reaction, or to me that is a lot about your own reflection of where you have still have power hidden in a lot of that stuff too. So I know for myself, with say our parents, a lot of that came to just actually speaking up for myself. So it looked like, okay, I was going against their beliefs, and definitely were on many levels, and changing that. But it was also a lot about actually just speaking up for myself, which was probably a pattern that I had through childhood. So it kind of, you have to kind of differentiate a little bit, I think, sometimes, that not feeling safe in your family with actual maybe childhood patterns that you're kind of mixing them up with sometimes, and that's part of the reason why you don't feel safe. Maybe it's got nothing to do with the spiritual aspect of yourself. I don't know. Like, I'm sure there is mixes of that. You know, everyone's going to be at a different place on that journey too. But I think from the bigger picture perspective, if we're all sort of, you know, on the awakening journey to know ourselves as infinite, then this is a barrier, if you like, that you have to kind of go through, because you can't, in my mind, you can't be an infinite being and have a fear of not being safe in the world. Like, it just doesn't equate. Like, it's that whole thing of one foot in each world again that we've spoken about before. It's just like it doesn't compute, and that's why we feel like we can't, you know, be our infinite selves, because they've got this thing that's sort of holding us back, this fear that's still sitting there, that not addressed, not acknowledged, not brought to the surface. And really, you know, the law of reflection, which is a universal principle, tells us that everything that we see outside of us is purely a reflection of our consciousness. So if we really do get that principle and we live that principle, then there's really no room for not being your authentic self in front of everybody. Like, if you really are living that and embracing that, and you really do get that principle at its core, and the science behind that, even, you know, this is all backed up by science as well. So it's like really feeling into that and of the truth of that universal principle, and sort of going, okay, people can only reflect my consciousness. So if I am getting pushed back from somebody, like you're saying, then it has to be indicative of where I haven't accepted my own interest in consciousness and spirituality, and the path that I feel like I've been taken down, sometimes against our will. It feels a bit like you're being thrown down the consciousness line, and you sort of go a bit kicking and screaming. But I definitely felt embarrassed by it for a long time. And, you know, I come from a police background, so this really isn't like marrying up really well with the police background. So like, suddenly I'm into spirituality, like, it just doesn't compute. Like, and not that I hang around police people all the time or anything, but at the time I was, when I first started this process, I was still in the police, and not long after I left, I was still hanging around lots of you know, different friends of mine. And this was a massive shift for me, that I suddenly felt like I was on, because of what had taken place. You know, I'd left my job and I'd left my husband at the time, within very quick succession of each other, and so my life felt like it was falling apart. So suddenly I found myself at a course, which you're at as well, and that was really the start of our journey together. And I was shifting really quickly at that point, because suddenly I felt like, oh my God, I'm here in a space that actually feels like me. Like, I can't actually deny that this is really what I've been looking for forever. So suddenly it's like, oh my God, I feel like really drawn into this world, and it's feeling really congruent. So then the other stuff's not feeling so congruent now. And it was really tough at times, because people were seeing me shift and change, and suddenly my language was changing, and I was not thinking the same way as they were. And it was, I definitely had a few head-to-heads with different people that were sort of like, well, how can you say that now? Like, you're saying reality is not real, and this is like all these different sort of bits and pieces. And of course, when you first start on the journey, you think everybody should know about the journey. So you're sort of spreading it off to everybody.
So that I'm sure that
We're
didn't
trying to
happen.
explain things to people.
Yeah, and you sort of don't have a full grasp on it yourself. You've only got the intellectual aspect of it because you haven't fully embodied it yet. So then you're trying to have a conversation with people and they're pushing back and you're sort of just getting more and more hyped up because defending it, because you know you can feel the truth of it, but you haven't actually really embodied it on every level.
Yeah, true.
It's like this real backwards and forwards, and I'm sure everyone's experienced this at the time when and maybe we do go when we first embark on the journey, think we're having so many shifts and changes and stuff. We want everybody to know about it. So we almost sprout it off to the world. And then there's a point at which you get so much pushback, you almost go back the opposite direction and go internally again and go, okay, I just need to sort of shut up now and do my own thing. And I'll just shut down in terms of telling people.
Yes.
And I do sort of get that because I don't think it is something that needs to be sprouted to the world.
No, I don't think so either.
Unless it feels true for you to do that.
Because I suppose you have to ask what's underneath that too. It's just like, why do we feel the need to project it to everybody in the world and feel like we've got a better way of living? And that all definitely comes from
arrogance,
ego agendas, to be accepted or to feel like we know more than somebody else, or superiority, self-righteousness, all those type of traits that, you know, show up, tend to anyway. So it's kind of more about that sometimes at the end of the day.
Yeah, it sort of feels like a phase you go through, doesn't it? Like that sort of, it's almost the ego does get a hold of it and like, oh, I know all this. I'm waking up now. I'm getting all this stuff. And suddenly you know more than everybody. Like, oh, you shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't be responding like that. Or you should be a lot more neutral about that sort of thing. Like, you should just be in love all the time. So I don't know whether there's some past life thing. I know a lot of people talk about that. I don't know where I sit with the whole past life thing because at the end of the day, there is only the now.
Yeah.
So any past life stuff can only be an issue if it's brought into the present moment and you're thinking about it right now and you feel like you're holding, like there has to be some sort of story there that says I'm holding beliefs of the past. But
it's still running in some way. Yeah, you're bringing that past into the present moment.
Into the present moment. So then I feel like when you have that, you have the opportunity to handle it whichever way you want, sort of thing. You don't have to hang on to that. You don't want to. If it does feel like it's come from a past life, then there has to be some degree of story around that that's running. So you can just let go of that story if you want to. It doesn't have to affect you. But I've definitely felt that too, like, you know, this whole witches burning thing, and I feel like I can tap into the energy of that. Is that my energy, or I'm just tapping into the collective energy of what that would feel like? I don't know. I really don't know, but I
think a lot of the time it would be the collective energy, because if there's enough people thinking about that, you know, being that way in the world and thinking that that's a fear, and we do tap into those things, like, you know, there's, you know, a billion other people on the planet thinking the same thing, then we do feel that in consciousness too, and it does affect us on an energetic level as well. But then we have to use our discernment, I guess, where we work out if that's something that works for us or doesn't. Do we want to take that thing on board or not? Does that fit in with being an infinite being or not? Like, is it supportive, or is it keeping the illusion going? Is it keeping the separation going? You have to be really honest.
It sort of brings up 2 points. Is it expansive? If it's not expansive, then it's not infinite, I guess. Then it is, you've got the opportunity to let that go and go, okay, I want to have more expansive experience right now than that storyline. But it does remind me of what we spoke a little bit about yesterday and touched on, was the fact that the ego makes everything personal. That's what it does. But in actual fact, the ego itself is actually a collective thought process and energy, which you tap into. But then you take ownership of that, going, it's my ego and it's my thoughts and it's my belief systems and it's my past lives and all that sort of stuff. So anytime you've got the word my in there, then you can guarantee that the egos come back, because that's what it does. It takes ownership of stuff, and then suddenly it's your problem you have to deal with. So rather than everybody's tapping into this stuff, and you can choose to tap into it or not. You can switch it on or off, whatever you'd like to do. So
and I think a lot of the fear, if you like, around, you know, maybe having these conversations with friends or family that you feel will be quite judgmental, towards your stance. And that could be 100% true, like that they will be judgmental towards you. Definitely have experienced that. So 100% get that there's a part that feels quite scared to, to challenge somebody or to have a conversation, because you might feel like you're going to be overpowered or not be able to speak your truth clearly or be heard. So they're all kind of, valid concerns, but we do have to remember that they're all ego concerns as well, like, because from the infinite space, the infinite is not concerned about upsetting the apple cart or being judged or whatever. Like, it's just an experience to see what that feeling is bringing up within you at the end of the day too. So, and I'm just thinking, I can recall having I've had quite a few conversations with my parents over the years, I guess, around some of the differences, in sort of my journey now compared to what they would like us to be doing. And I can remember one in particular was when my husband and I separated for a period of time, about 10.
Can you just hold up your microphone? It's just scraping on your jacket there.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I'm holding the wrong bit. Sorry. I was holding the other side. So I can remember we separated for a little while, about 12 years ago, a long time ago now. But I remember having to have that conversation with them to tell them that we had separated, because I knew 100% what their reaction would be.
Well, you weren't disappointed.
No, it wasn't. If anything, it was probably more worse than what I was actually expecting. But at the same time, it's just like, you know what, I have to actually have this conversation. In some ways, it was actually harder having that conversation than it actually was with my husband, which is bizarre. But that just reflects the relationship that I had with them, so that's, I had to kind of sit and, allow some of those feelings to come up too, and kind of go, wow, this is noticing that it was harder for some reason to have that conversation, and sort of seeing what some of that was about too. But I just remember going into the house that night with them and being got myself into such a state of presence that when I actually did get around to telling them, it was almost like I stepped out of my body and I was watching myself have the conversation with them. And I was so calm. Like, it was like amazing how calm I actually got myself to, because I actually just decided to stay in the present moment and just speak whatever needed to come through for me. They were going to have their reaction. Fine. Let them have their reaction. Let them say whatever they're going to say. And then it was up to me whether I made that mean something about me or not. Like, I had to keep really staying present and bringing myself to that present state. And, there was a lot of stuff said, some of it was quite harsh, so and definitely untrue. It was not even close to the truth, of what was actually going on. But it's just, that's what happens, I suppose, with judgments. It's coming through that person's perception, their own lens of life and their own belief systems. And we do the same too when we find ourselves judging people, where we're basically saying it's not okay for you to have a different belief to me. That's basically all we're saying, is like, for some reason it's not okay that we can be different and think differently and coexist, sort of thing. But we all have to be the same for some reason. But so I just remember that conversation and sitting there hearing all the stuff. And I had moments definitely of getting triggered. Like, there was definitely times where it was like, oh, that was really harsh, that sort of particular statement or something like that. But then I have to just keep bringing myself back into that present moment. Like, and it was just, I remember leaving the house that night just kind of feeling like such a freedom on some level, like that I was actually able to have that conversation and to sort of hold my own in the conversation and say, you know what, I'm not actually backing down. Like, this is my truth, and I actually don't care how you feel about that. Like, this is who I am. This is what I'm doing. This is what I stand for. This is what I believe. So it's almost like sometimes we have to have those types of conversations to actually draw that line in the sand for ourselves. And it is literally for ourselves. We're saying, this is who I am. Like, I'm committed to being this way, like to, expand more into my infinite self. Like, we already are our infinite self. Like, we've just not seeing it. So it's that more creating that more space for that awareness of how expanded we actually are. So it's the more we can have these type of conversations and come out of the closet, if you like, and sort of just be more okay with who we actually are, then we start to feel that expanded state a lot more, and we actually don't care so much about what other people are thinking or feeling about us, or we just choose to not spend time with those people. Like, it's just nothing says we have to spend time with our family at the end of the day. Like, it's It's purely a choice whether we do or we don't. Like, and that's your own rules and beliefs that you have around that too. So there's nothing. I don't think the infant would say that just because you were born from someone, you have to hang around that person. Like, it's just it's
No.
like it's a journey. Like, you've put them there in your storyline for some reason, and maybe you're meant to walk away. Maybe you're meant to
and that's
choose not to be with them, or maybe the relationship will change over time because you just keep staying true to you.
Yeah.
Eventually, they'll probably get sick of trying to change you, and they might come around, or just let you be. Like, that they don't necessarily have to believe what you think, but they just let you be and do what you're going to do, like, without sort of having to have an opinion on every turn that you make, sort of thing.
Well, whoever has the most certainty wins the game at the end of the day, and I always bring myself back to that. So if I feel wavering in some area, like having a conversation with mum and dad, or it doesn't matter what we're doing, if there's pushback on that, it's because I'm not certain.
It's true.
So they can only reflect that. So I mean, everyone would have experienced this, where you see somebody so in their power, so in their certainty about what they're talking about, and it doesn't matter what topic it is.
It can be very controversial.
And they could be really controversial about what they're saying, but no one will question them. And it's because there's just this energy of certainty around that person, that it's coming from deep within out, and there's no ego. It just is what it is. And there's this real solidness to that. And
it's not coming from a space of trying to change the other person's perception. It's just, this is who I am.
This is it.
Yeah, that's it. No ego, as you said.
Yeah, very much so. And it's, I guess I've had that experience coming out of the closet, being, having to have a conversation to mum and dad about now having a relationship with a woman after being married, and having all my relationships with men prior to this. And I guess there was this feeling of like they just didn't understand type thing. And I totally get that. And I guess that's part of this whole process as well, is actually understanding where that person's coming from and having empathy for that. So if they are particularly really religious, or they've had a real stand on a particular thing, they're not going to 100% understand where you're coming from, and totally get that. And it is not trying to change them. It is just, but not wavering on what feels true for you as well. And you have to go through that process, and it can take ages. And a lot of people said that to us. It's like, they're not going to accept it straight away. It's going to possibly take years for them to do that. But I just kept feeling empathy for them, and not trying to change them, and just staying true to myself. And eventually it did come back full circle. It blew up last time we were back in Australia. As you know, you were part of it, man.
Yes.
In fact, the whole family was part of it. But then on the back end of that, just staying really humble and really calm about that, they actually, because of that humbleness, I feel, and I didn't get on my high horse about anything. I was just like, okay, I'm sorry that you feel that way. But it still feels true for me to take this, I'm not breaking up with Jodie. This is who I am. We'll be together probably forever. And I said that to them, and they said, yeah, we realize that. And eventually it did come back full circle. Like a month or two later, they realized what they had done, and they started inviting Jodie over. And I was like, that was never going to happen. That Jodie would be invited to their house.
Yes.
And suddenly we got an invite to the house. I was like, okay, because I didn't know what to say. Like, okay, like, this has been years. We're talking like 5 years we've been together. Not that we live in Australia, so it's not like we're on the doorstep all the time. But it was just like this sudden change of heart. I was like, holy crap. So I finally approached them about it and said, well, thank you for the change of heart, because it's definitely making life a lot easier for everybody.
Yes.
And they went, yeah, we realized that, we really needed to sort of accept this situation now and stuff. We don't agree with it. And like, because I had said to them, look, I know you don't agree with it. And that was their big fear was, and maybe this is, maybe this is part of it for other people to really take note of, is they thought I was trying to change them. And I said, no, I understand that you don't accept this. And I'm 100% that you'll never accept this. And I'm not trying to change that. So they thought by accepting it that they were agreeing with it. They're condoning with it. Yeah. And I said, no, I know you still don't agree with it. And I'm okay with that. But we have to reach an agreement that's workable for everybody here. Because I'm caught in the middle, and it's really not comfortable. And so once they knew that their beliefs were secure still, and I wasn't trying to change those beliefs, that's when it changed. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And I think there is a part of that for this conversation we're having here too, is when people know that you're secure, that they are secure, that you're not trying to change them from their religious beliefs or their indoctrinated beliefs of whatever they have around consciousness, then you're a lot freer to speak your truth and have a more flowing conversation with each other. Around that. Yeah.
And I think it is a two-way street too. I mean, from the bigger picture, of course, there is just one consciousness and we're all the same consciousness. So there is no other person. It's all us. It's all reflections of us at the end of the day. But if we're going to sort of take it down into the human game, it's, the other people there in our story are there to reflect stuff back to us too. So, okay, we have a hard conversation with somebody. We feel judged by them. What is that stirring within us to see? Because that's all why that experience is happening. So anything that triggers you, it's literally to look at that feeling within yourself that's coming up. Like we spoke about, a couple of days ago, the opportunity is sitting there and that fear that rises up within you to release that, because that's where your power is sitting. But then from the other side, if there was this separation and the other person was different to you, like like what you're saying, they want to feel secure in their beliefs that you're not trying to change them. But we have to remember at the end of the day that they're having their own experience too. So they're going to have feelings coming up for them that they're trying to protect. They don't want to face certain things that are coming up for them, or it's a challenge to their identity that they've had for 50, 60 years. They don't want to explore being different, or that there could be a different way. They just think they're right, and maybe they are, like for them, maybe that is their absolute truth. That's up to them to, explore that if they want to or don't want to explore that too. But also there is then the other stories that come up, I guess, say in the case of, say from a religious perspective, say in the case of, either me separating for a while, and that, definitely when she left her husband, and then when she sort of said she was in a relationship with the woman, like coming, from our parents' perspective, coming from a Catholic religion, that is almost like the worst thing that could happen to you. Like, they feel like it's a reflection on them. Like, so in the eyes of God, they feel like it's a reflection on them, that they've done something wrong. So they were feeling guilty, like they hadn't been good parents, they hadn't raised us properly. They were angry because
once a week at church wasn't enough.
So there's all this kind of, but you got to remember that's their stories that are coming up, and we can't change that for them. It's their experience. They have to have their own experience, and we get to have our own experience. And it is about just that discernment, I think, when to share stuff, when not to share stuff. Like, we don't have to share anything. There's no obligation to share anything. And we have to ask why we feel like sharing stuff sometimes. Like, is it coming from a self-righteous place? But then there's that other side of like, don't not share because of being afraid of the judgment too. Because that is part of the human experience, is actually there to bring up, like, if we looked at it more as the opportunity that it actually is, that's what the ego is helping us do. It's that tool that we've said before. It's there to actually help us, to show us where we still have our power. So if we were to approach everything from, this is the infinite part of me trying to expand into a bigger awareness of who I truly am. So by feeling those triggers coming up and actually sitting with them rather than reacting out of that space, we get to show up more as who we truly are. And I think that includes just sharing spiritual stuff, or even just saying, this is who I am. We don't have to share our beliefs with them. It's just, no. Don't hide who you are.
Don't go and put all the books away when mum and dad are coming over, or a certain friend's coming over, or,
or you can't talk about you can't share part of your life because they don't.
You're doing a particular course and you can't tell people what that course is. It's like,
I've had that experience before where I've almost like stepped on people's toes by sort of just sharing something and not actually realizing that person didn't want anybody to know, like, about. I'm just kind of like, it wasn't even a concept of mine. So it was just kind of interesting that some people,
they didn't want anyone in their life to know that they were doing
a course or something like that. And I was just like, like
this sort of stuff.
And it wasn't even like a really personal share of anything. It was literally just sharing a photo of being somewhere. That was literally it. And it was kind of like, wow, that was an intense kind of reaction to that, like from that person. It's just like, wow, you've really still got some fear tied up in this, not being able to share this part of you with the world, which is really interesting. Like, it's just kind of, what's that about for you, sort of thing. Yeah, but it's like I didn't have that paradigm going on for myself. It's just like, okay, if someone doesn't like what I'm doing, who cares? Like, I don't,
they don't have to. Yeah,
they don't have to.
You don't have to. It's
Trying
not like you're
impress
trying to
them.
convince everyone. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's the thing. It's like, if we're going out with some idea of trying to convince people or something like that, then yeah, you're going to get pushback. But if you're just living your own truth in your own world, and you're putting stuff out, or, you know, it's just like me being with Jodie type thing. It's like, I'm just going about my day. Like, a lot of people sort of say, oh, how do you go traveling the world? Because we travel all the time. Like, we're, you know, fully nomadic. We have been for 7 years or something. So we've been to heaps of countries, and people sort of say, oh, how do you go, you know, being a same-sex couple? I was like, we don't have anything around it. Like, we don't get any, no one's ever asked us about anything. Like, we don't have one single thing go on in the entire time we've been traveling to all different countries, and some quite religious countries. You know, we don't go out of our way to make it a thing, because we don't have an agenda around it. It's just is what
you just
it
respect other people's.
That's the thing. Like, I don't go and hold a hand in
and
Barbados because they're really Catholic there. Like, I just respect somebody's culture and where they're at. But yeah, and I think it's just because we're so okay with it, and that's what I always say to anyone about that, is like, because we're so okay with it, we don't get anything back from it. Like, that's the whole point. If we had an issue with it, we would definitely get more stuff. 100%.
And I think it's the same with spiritual stuff too. If we have a feeling, a belief around, oh, this is a bit out there, I can't talk to people about, I don't know, maybe you channel angels or something, or you speak light language or something that's kind of a little bit different. You know, I've got friends that do that kind of stuff, and they're quite, well, in varying stages, I guess, of coming out to people about what they actually do. Like, that's a new gift that they're exploring, if you like, which we're going to probably address a bit more tomorrow.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
How where we hold ourselves back from sharing our gifts with the world, but they're in varying stages of kind of expanding into that awareness, I guess, if you like, of who they are. So there is definitely stories around. I can't share that part of me. I can share it with these people, but not that person, and all these type of things. Like, it's all part of the journey too, but it depends on your stance on that too. Like, if you're using that as if you're using it as an awareness tool to see where you still have some power hidden, and you let yourself face those uncomfortable feelings, or do you let it just separate you and put a wall up, and you just really compartmentalize that part of your life and you don't share it? That's kind of staying in the separation zone. That's still keeping it that foot in one world and not in the infinite world. So it to me, it sort of goes against what consciousness is. If you're on an awakening journey, don't you actually want to know who you truly are? So you have to face that stuff that's coming up. And
I think that's it. I mean, it might turn to shit for a while, like it did for me. Like, it was a lot worse. It was a lot worse for you, and it was a lot worse for me. When I finally told them, they went freaking ballistic. The first thing out of her mouth was, I don't accept that, and I never will. I was like, right, where do I go with that now? Okay. And she was angry, really, really angry. And it was horrible for years, like, really.
And I remember saying to you at the time too that you, because you had actually not told mum and dad for quite a while about what was actually going on. And I remember saying to Nat, you actually have to do this for yourself, because it's not about them at the end of the day. They're going to have their reaction, and you can 100% count on the reaction.
What it's going to be.
It's going to happen. So you just have to actually expect that that's what's going to happen. And you know, it's not true. It's just their own, you know, beliefs that it's not true for you, is what I mean. It's true for them, but it's not true for you. So you don't have to take it on. It's hard to hear. You don't want your parents to be disappointed in you, of course.
Like, it's that's kind the hardest one, isn't it? Like,
and that's the thing that you've got to face, I suppose, is like, that's the feelings that it brings up in you. It's like, oh, wow, oh, maybe there is some conditions to the love that I thought, you know, that parents are not meant to have. They're meant to be unconditional in their love, like, and then you sort of experience like, wow, that was really judgmental. So how does that fit into that space? But that's a story that we're bought into too, that everyone has to be unconditional in their love. Somehow parents are meant to be unconditional, and it's like, they're human as well as at the end of the day too. So it's a story that we buy too, that everyone's going to come from an unconditional space, and it's just like, it just doesn't it doesn't happen. Not if we don't have awareness.
Realistic.
Yeah, if we don't bring awareness, and then you're going to get the judgments, and you have to go through sometimes those conversations, but it brings up what it's going to bring up for you. And that's what I said to Nat too, is just have the conversation. It will be hard. You'll hear some stuff that will be probably hard to hear. It is what it is. But you will feel so much freer on the other side of it, because it's about you at the end of the day. And that's kind of what you did. And yes, it did turn to shit for a while. And I was involved in the conversations and things as well. And it's kind of, so it's like, it just was it just is what it is. Like, it's part of the journey sometimes for that to look like that in the story. Like, we've put it there for a reason.
But the interesting thing was, there's 2 points on that. The interesting thing was feeling into the consciousness of it. Like, all the stuff is playing out in front of you. Like, we had a massive blow up when I went back at Christmas time 2 years ago. And actually sitting there, I was actually just really calm. I was so detached from it, because it was just like, underneath it, I know that they don't mean all this stuff. And there's actually there is a real unconditional love still there.
It's true,
and
laid over with
no matter what happens, they would still love me. But then the story gets layered on top of that. The performance, the drama, the this, the that, the throwing the arms, the yelling, like all this stuff that was carrying on at that time. I was just like, okay, this is not part of it. Like, this is not
who they are.
Just the layer on top. And it is really shitty right now to actually watch that layer on top play out. It's a bit hurtful here and there, but it's just a layer on top. It's nothing. Like, it's dissipating itself. It's almost like them getting all their stuff out actually is them releasing. So I can feel, and I just say tuned into that, like that, tuned into that unconditional love that's sat underneath that. And I was like, that's the truth right now. That's what I have to tap into and stay connected to. And I did. And it by the next day, Mum apologized. She said when she went right off. I was like, yep, you did. And it was fine again. That actually was the starting point. That next morning was the starting point of the healing process that took place to a couple of weeks later, actually inviting 𝙎𝙩𝙬𝙚 over. And I was like, wow, that I would never have even guessed could have been possible. But and I guess that's the thing, is like, only love heals at the end of the day. Like, all the other shit that goes on is the storyline, is the movie on the projector screen, is just the performance. That's all it is. But underneath it sits an unconditional love, because we all are unconditional love at the end of the day. It has to still be there, sitting underneath it all. And that's what you can tune into. It's always there. You can tune into it when you choose to. And I think
it comes back to that idea of, like, say it is a hard relationship that you might have with a loved one, and something you're going to share with them is going to be quite challenging for them. But we do sometimes hold ourselves back because we fear, like, that judgment, or we think they're going to be this certain way, and we're expecting.
Well, you don't want to upset them either. Like, you don't want to hurt.
There's that part of you that doesn't want to hurt them. You're not going out of your way to try and hurt them, but you want to be yourself at the end of the day. So there's that choice. It's a choice you have to make. What are you going to stand up for yourself, or are you going to try and stay in a limitation that just clearly does not work for you? You can try that for a while, but it will ultimately not work. Like, it will ultimately come back in some way, shape, or form to wake you up to what's actually happening there. So, but I was just thinking, like, it's almost like we do go into those situations sometimes with that expectation of how that person's going to be, and probably they might match what you think, but we also hold them in a story that they can't be different as well. And I've definitely done this. Like, or I think, oh no, they're going to say exactly that, and that's what they do say. Like, so it's kind of like,
have you created them to say that?
Like, is that my projection?
You're creating your reality.
And that's what it is. At the end of the day, it's just like that's actually more the truth. Like, from the bigger perspective, that is actually what's happening. It's like, I'm the one that's holding them in an identity, and not giving them room to be different either. So I guess when we come from a present state, and we are so okay with where we are at with things, and we just share from that space, and we're not coming from that space of trying to change somebody,
or having expectations of how they're going to, like, which is what you're saying right now, is you had an expectation of how they're going to respond. So how can they respond any different? You've created your reality.
So you give people an opportunity to show up very differently. And I'm just thinking of a story I just heard very recently. Actually, it was on a television program here in Australia where a comedian slash artist, he paints people's portraits in the moment while he actually talks to them about their life story. And he was talking to a lady called 𝘾𝙤𝙤𝙀𝙤, who is a well-known Australian chef. She's very well known, lots of cookbooks out, and worked in some of the top restaurants and things like that, had her own restaurants. So she had recently come out as being gay, and she told her Chinese parents about, well, that they actually kind of deducted it themselves. They sort of worked out that this friend that she had, that she was in a relationship with this friend, and the dad sort of asked her outright one particular night and said, "Are you in a relationship with X," whatever the lady's name was? And she said, "Yes, Dad, I am." Like, and she said, "I had to just tell him, you know, like I didn't want to tell him, but like I was like, yeah, you know what, yes, I am." And she said he went right off and kind of said, "That's it. Got to the end of the week and you're out. Like, you've got to get your stuff. You're moving out. You're not staying in my house. I disown you." Said all this stuff to her, and so she went to bed. She must have been staying with them for some reason, and she went, you know, to her room, and she was really upset. And the mum came in, was like, "I'm so sorry, but you know what your father's like," kind of thing, and you know, he doesn't mean it, and all this kind of stuff. And so she was, you know, sort of probably fully prepared for what the response she was going to get, but like also it hurt, obviously, on some level to do that. But she felt really free from just being, you know, who she was in that moment. And then she said within, it was like 24 hours or 48 hours, something like that, I think it was a couple of days, the dad sort of ignored her, didn't say much at all. And then one night she woke up and he was actually sort of kneeling next to her bed crying and sort of saying, don't go, I don't want you to move out. I didn't mean it. Like, I'm finding it really hard to understand. I don't know if I'll ever understand it, but you're my daughter. I can't sort of." And she sort of like was just amazed that she said, like, in the space of like 48 hours, somebody's belief that they've had for 60 years or however old he was could like have enough compassion, I guess, or enough awareness of themselves to kind of go, I have to re-examine how I'm looking at this situation. So we don't know the opportunity that sometimes that we're going to give the other person by giving, like, it's almost like we
allowing them to release.
I was going to say, it's a judgment we have on them,
own
that
restrictions,
they won't be able to shift and wake up themselves. Like, and it doesn't mean they have to believe what we believe by any means, but we don't give them sometimes the opportunity to expand their awareness of themselves and expand their beliefs. And so which is what happened in that story. She's just like, wow, like how much can change in a very short period of time when we don't have any expectation or judgment on that person having to be different. They probably feel that freedom and they get the experience to explore that for themselves, or not. You know, that's their choice too.
But it does remind me of another thing that I did go through, was really questioning what's the role that mum and dad have. Like, I've given them, like, it's sort of like, okay, they're my mum and dad, so the expectation then, and this could go for anyone in your family or a friend or whatever, but because they're my parents, they should love me and they should accept me. And that was my premise. You know, and I think that's a pretty common premise sort of thing, like parents should have their unconditional love, like you're saying.
As I was saying, I think it's a very common feeling that this is how parents should be.
And so you have that expectation. So I created a role for them, and I just went, no, I'm going to drop that, because that's my thing. I don't actually have to have love and acceptance from my parents. I'm actually okay without that. I'm still surviving. I still thrive. And really, if I have enough love for myself and I'm standing in my truth, then I actually don't need necessary love from anyone else in the outside world. But I had placed my expectation on the fact that that's how they should be. As soon as I started dropping that, that's actually what was shifting. Now I think about it, that actually was a lot of it was what shifted them, because suddenly I didn't have an expectation that they should show up in a certain way because they're my parents. In the storyline, they're my parents, and so they should show up somewhere in a particular way. And so I dropped that. I released them from that role. And just went, they're two people in my life. Yes, they gave birth to me, but, and I guess this comes back to, you know, and maybe this is something that does get discussed a little bit in conscious circles, is that just because you have a family and parents doesn't mean that they're meant to be with you on your entire journey.
Yes.
And that they're supposed to support you and love you and have all those sorts of things. They're our expectations because the storyline tells us that.
Yes.
But maybe they were just meant to birth you and raise you. And your actual family, as such, is actually the people that you really gel with, your community. And that's why we feel drawn to that community, because that becomes, and that feels more like a family to us. It does feel like that safe space, if you like.
Yeah. A lot of people say that, like your soul family, what you would consider soul family is usually not your biological family, except maybe in the case of men, Nat and I.
Well, it's amazing how many people have said, like, you're so lucky you've got your sister on the journey.
Yes, I've had that too, definitely. Yeah.
So few families actually experience that, where you actually have more than one person that's actually on that consciousness, really full-on consciousness journey.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
funnily enough, I think we can actually have these conversations with our brothers as well on some level. So it's quite an interesting dynamic that we have sometimes in our family. They're definitely not, as much into it as we are, for sure, but they do have an understanding of it, and we can definitely have a conversation with them, like, no problem, like they're happy to go there and explore that. So it's quite an interesting dynamic.
And even their partners are too, like,
very
talk to their partners about it. So it's actually really interesting how
it is probably quite outside the norm, like, and I don't know, for whatever reason we've created that story, but but then at the same time we've got very challenging parents, like, so it's kind of an interesting dynamic, and that will show up very differently for everyone. Some people have absolutely no one in their family that gets them, maybe disowns them for your beliefs, and that's, on some level we've created that storyline to bring up whatever it's going to bring us up. Maybe it spurs you on to be a certain way in your life, like you fully step into your gifts and you be who you are, because they're not going to be on your journey anyway, so you might as well. So then you're not trying to impress anybody anymore. So it's kind of, everything is always supporting us. The universe is always happening for us. We've always got to remember that. It's our creation. We get to see what it's bringing up in us, regardless of what the outside story is.
And I guess ultimately this whole thing is about giving yourself the opportunity to have that experience, to give them the experience, and also whoever it is, and also your own experience. Like, if you're not going to go there with people because you're holding back and you're in the closet about your consciousness or spirituality or being gay, or it doesn't matter what it is, if you're hiding any part of your life because of fear of what somebody else is going to say about that, then you really give nobody, including yourself, most importantly yourself, the opportunity to actually shift and see what going there actually is meant to get from it. Like, you have a fear coming up for a reason, and that's because there's something actually to be seen. Otherwise you wouldn't have anything. You'd just go and blurt it out to the world. You wouldn't care less. But because you've got a feeling of something coming up at a barrier there, then it shows you, that's the actual indicator, that there is actually something to be seen. So you're not giving yourself the opportunity to actually see that and expand, and then love that part of your journey and part of you. So you block that from yourself and from other people. By not going there.
Definitely. And at the end of the day, like, in everything that we're about here, the infinite me, and the revolution that we're talking about, that's that we're launching, it's all about stepping fully into being infinite. So that means being your true self. And what does that look like? How do you get to show up in the world when you just allow yourself to be that? And that may look like having some hard conversations, or maybe not. Like, I don't know, is that a projection too, that they are going to be hard? Like, because we, like what you're just saying, we don't allow ourselves sometimes to go into those situations because we've already created the outcome. Like, we've already in our mind projected the outcome, projected the judgments we think we're going to get. So are we creating that? Like, it's kind of like, well, from the infinite perspective, we are. Like, on some level we're creating that, we've put it there, and it's only to bring up within us what we're meant to be seeing from it. And so who wants to go on that journey? It looks a little bit scary to the ego and the personality, but, like, at the end of the day, are we here to live infinitely and feel free and know who we truly are and expand into that state? Like, I know that's what I want. So it's kind of like you have to be willing to fully embrace that then, and know yourself as the infinite being, where you don't feel like you need the safety anymore. You don't feel like you have to hold yourself back or show up differently in different situations. You get to actually just be your true self all the time. as much as you can. And if you find yourself not being that in some way, then see what it's bringing up for you, and you get to release that part of yourself and see more and more of your expanded self and who you truly are.
Yeah. And I've got to say, I lose my voice. As a final point before I lose my voice, is the more that we've stepped into this space of being infinite and only talking about this stuff now.
Yeah, definitely.
We put up on our personal profiles the other day an announcement, well, like a header that says "Infinite Me." Come on, watch our live conversations every day.
Yep.
And so now all my friends and family have seen that on Facebook, except Mum and Dad. They're not on Facebook. Funny enough.
I think Dad's got a profile but doesn't know how to use it. So.
There you go. But now it's sort of like, it was like almost declaring or making an announcement. Well, this is the work we're doing. Mandy and I are working together, and this is what we're doing. And it's like, wow, I actually had nothing around that. I would never have done that before. And it's like, how interesting is that? The more I've actually stepped into my infinite power, and I didn't even think twice about putting up that banner on our thing, or now taking these posts and putting them across on my personal profile and on the Nat and Jody profile and stuff like that. So now everybody's aware that we're actually doing this stuff. And I was like, I actually didn't even think twice about that. How interesting.
Yeah.
Whereas before I would have been, oh my God, what are people going to think? Blah, blah, blah. Because I'm in Storyland. But now, because I'm not in Storyland, or certainly not as much, and I'm just in the infinite space, it actually had just nothing. There was just no energy around it anymore. And I was like, that's an interesting observation.
Yeah, I think that decision to jump fully in, 2 feet into living infinitely, and what does that look like to make that your space that you come from all the time, well, as much as you possibly can, like you'll have moments where you slip out of that awareness, I suppose, but that's part of it. Like, it's all seeing it for what that is too. But the more we can stay in that present space and know ourselves as the infinite, then the other stuff just it's fallen away so quickly. The stories have just completely shifted, or they may be still there, like they may look like they're still unfolding in your reality, but you don't have reaction to them anymore. There's it's just a story. Like, there's no judgment on the story anymore or anything like that. It's just something that's happening outside of you. And that's when you know that you've expanded your awareness, because you don't have a reaction anymore to something. So the circumstance may not have changed at all on the outside, but you don't have the same feeling. So in this case that you're sort of saying, nothing has changed on the outside. Like, it's not like we've had a conversation with people and told them what we're doing, or it just put something up on a Facebook page and sort of said, this is what we're doing, and like, that's it. But to us, there was no reaction anymore, or feeling like, oh, a bit people, I don't want to tell this person, or but what will this person think, or that was sort of gone. Like, or if there was a little remnant of it, it was like not much, like, and it went really quickly, because I know for me there was like a slight sort of in the beginning, like a slight like, oh, putting this out. And it wasn't because I was thinking what other people were going to judge me about. I think it was my own thing about expanding into that space. Like, it was more about that fear I had, which we've spoken about in I think it could have been yesterday's one. We're talking about that fear of your own power. Yeah, it was definitely yesterday. It's a fear of expanding into that space that is going to call you up to a whole different level way of being. That's what my fear was around. It wasn't anything to do with what I thought other people were going to think about it. But I could have convinced myself that was what it was about. Like, that's what the ego would help, make us think sometimes, is we have to be very vigilant for those thoughts at times that come up. So definitely. Yes.
Very cool. Well, there you go. Tomorrow we're going to talk about stepping into your projects and what you're here to do, your gifts to the world,
bringing gifts to the world.
How you might be holding yourself back from that, because they might be consciousness or spiritually type gifts that seemingly are a bit different to what other people are doing in the world and what the general masses are doing.
Yes.
We're still in the new age category. We still have to we're still dubbed with that, or painted with that brush. So the dangers of holding yourself back from your gifts and putting your work out to the world in its full flourishment, in 100%. Here I am declaring to the world, this is what I'm doing now. And so that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow.
Yes.
that sort of follows on from the last few days.
Yep. And thanks for joining us, and let us know in the comments what came up for you today listening to this. Like, where have you felt like you've held yourself back from sharing who you truly are with your friends or family or community, whatever that looks like, and how do you feel like you could start to expand that a bit more and start to bring more of yourself into your everyday life so that you can be yourself all the time? So we'd love to hear. Let us know.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. And we're also taking people now, early birds, into the revolution. You can come and join us over at theinfiniteme.com and sign on up. Declare your infiniteness. That's what it's all about. It's free to join, of course. And but we're starting a revolution, a movement around this stuff to say, let's do this.
Yes. Lots more coming. We're going to hopefully be launching on the 1st of October. That's our goal. So I was going to say aim goal.
That's our goal. If we can pull our shit together, we can actually launch first.
So we've got lots more coming, but that's the intention. So join up now and we'll keep you in the loop with what's coming. So
very cool. All right, we'll see you all tomorrow, and we'll continue on our conversation of our mini series. And this has been quite good. I've enjoyed this mini series.
Yeah, good. Yeah, good topics.
Juicy topics.
Yes.
Very cool. All right. Enjoy your day.
Bye.
Stay infinite, and get out of the closet. Stop being in the closet. You are infinite. Tell everybody.